He had always wanted to be a novice. Here at the great Priory at Guisborough, he was tall and thin with long, straight, dark hair. But he was scared now, and he could barely speak. Inside of the Priory, he was praying by the side of the great west window. He thought that there would be some safety inside of this great Priory. The monks were all about him, but they looked frightened too. He wanted really to be closer to the Lord for all of his sins. He hadn't always wanted to be a novice, but now there was nothing that he wished for more. His father had been a stonemason, the greatest master stonemason that this county had ever seen. He could turn stone, he could make it into swirls and whirls and look like anything that anyone would ever want to see, especially in the kingdom of the Lord. But now he remembered just a few years before when he'd been apprenticed to his father, and his father had always said, be careful. You must be careful in what you do. Always think about what you do and always do it well. But he was just a boy, much younger than he was now, and he had aged so much in the last few years. He had a hammer, he had a chisel, and his father had shown him how to hold it still and straight and always concentrate on what he could see. But he was a boy, he was distracted. He looked out towards the countryside, and his hand was too heavy upon the hammer, too light upon the chisel. It slipped, and it caught his father just above his wrist and cut him deeply, deeply into his flesh. Now, it wasn't such a terrible cut that he would bleed from it, but it was a fact that the chisel was not as clean, for he had not paid attention to think as his father had told him. And now there was an infection inside of his father's blood that ran and coursed through his veins, through his heart, until it took the breath from out of his body. He knew it was an accident, and his father forgave him, but he felt as if he needed forgiveness for the sin of not being thoughtful enough. Not thoughtful enough to keep the chisel still and straight so that it had killed his father. But he knew, as all of King Henry VIII's men were coming closer on this Christmas Eve of 1539, he knew that there was a relic, a small vial of a saint's blood, and only he would have known where it was, for he'd watched his father place it there by the side of the great west window. He kept that chisel, the chisel that had caused his father's death, and he used it to prise the stones away so he could get that vial and get away from that place and find sanctuary in another country where they would not be reviled for their religion. People would come, ask for his forgiveness, which would always seem so strange to him, the one who was seeking forgiveness himself. But he became a priest, became a bishop, and in his hand he had a crozier, but it was unlike any other crozier in all of God's kingdom, for the handle itself was made of a chisel that had once tasted his father's blood. Oh, and he was sad, for it always reminded him that if only he had thought. But now he knew what it was to seek forgiveness, and he could give forgiveness, and people would travel from the top of the world, from the side of the world, and all around to stand in his presence and touch that crozier that held a chisel inside of it that had once taken a man's life.